Lamar Jackson tweet, and I can't really make it out, and it's not showing up on my sheet here. Great company. Oh, Hard Rock Sportsbook. Now I can see, now that my eyes have focused. Quarterbacks in NFL history with some big number passer rating and some number of pass touchdowns. I'm glad this isn't an eye test at the DMV. But Lamar Jackson, in good company is what he has to say. The problem is he's yet to get his long-term contract, and all those other guys had agents. That's one of the big issues here. And I personally think as we get deeper and deeper into this, more and more people are realizing that it probably would have been a good idea for Lamar Jackson to have an agent all along, and it probably would be a good idea for him to go get one now. When I talk to people around the league, the thought is he's never going to do it because he's never going to want to admit expressly or implicitly that he should have had an agent all along. But he needs one now more than ever. And no matter the amount of talk by me or you, Peter, or anyone else, he's not going to change his mind. That's the prevailing thought. What are your prevailing thoughts after a rollicking week of news with Lamar Jackson available as of next week to talk to any team, negotiate with any team, sign an offer sheet with the team of his choosing, with the Ravens could then match if they choose? It's been a nutty week. Give me your big picture observation on what you think is going on with Lamar Jackson.
Well, Mike, last Friday would have been a good time to be sort of in regular PFT live mode because I was at the Combine, and this wasn't just agents, but it was people from teams who basically kept making the point, this is the week, right now, right here, that an agent would have more than paid off for Lamar Jackson. And the reason is, as you know, Mike, at the NFL Scouting Combine every year, there are, every agent is there in this sort of 6-block radius of downtown Indianapolis. You can't walk one block without seeing multiple agents / GMs, scouts, coaches. They're all there. All of them are there. Well, except for some of the head coaches now, but so they're all there. And to think that Agent X, if he represented Lamar Jackson, wouldn't run into, let's invent Jets GM Joe Douglas and say, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" And to walk with him for 2 blocks, or to be in St. Elmo's and run into him at the bar and say, "Hey, I got Lamar," and blah, 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 blah. And all of these conversations, that is what truly sculpts the market for a player. Agents leave the scouting combine knowing exactly what their clients are going to be up for starting Monday in the legal tampering period. They know exactly, I shouldn't say exactly, they know pretty much approximately what the market for, like Javon Hargrave's agent, Drew Rosenhaus, he pretty much knows the approximate nature of what the market is going to be for Javon Hargrave, one of the best players in free agency. All of these guys who have desirable players and who probably are going to get either deals or get deep into their deals on Monday and Tuesday, they'll all know what they're getting. And that is one of the big issues right now with Lamar Jackson. There's nobody who can say, "Hey, listen, I have Lamar's ear. Let me tell you what I'm thinking." And an agent saying, "Hey, here's what I think we can do." And there's nobody. Look, you have said this 64 times in the last year, and it is positively correct. And what you have said essentially is the agent is the guy who understands what the market is and can say things to Eric DeCosta in negotiations, and Eric DeCosta can say things back to him that Lamar Jackson is not going to say to DeCosta in their meeting, which I heard they had somewhere in Florida recently, and DeCosta is not going to say those things to Lamar. But Lamar has to understand that this contract is not just as easy as saying, I want what he got. There are issues that need to be discussed and bartered and argued about. And Eric DeCosta doesn't want to argue with Lamar Jackson because he's got to be his quarterback. He doesn't want Lamar Jackson saying, I hate that DeCosta and I hate the Ravens. So the middleman gets the hatred. How do you think do you think all of these teams, Russell Wilson's agent, Mark Rodgers, how do you think John Schneider and the Seahawks felt about him at the end? Not real good. How do you think he felt about John Schneider and Pete Carroll? Not real good. But that is what this business is. Agents wear the flak jackets. General managers wear the flak jackets. They take the shrapnel. And so the player doesn't have to, because it's bad for the player to take the shrapnel. And so I'm just saying, I don't want to do a commercial for agents, but for whatever you pay them, whatever it is, Mike, 3%, I don't know. But at this point, especially after Lamar has played the last 2 years, after being an MVP, and he's played the last 2 years for whatever the number is, 25, 26 million total in the last 2 years. I doubt sincerely, Tom Pelissero made this point this week on Rich Eisen's show. I doubt sincerely that an agent would have let him, play at least one of those years at the rate of pay that he was making, which obviously was far below the market of what an MVP quarterback should make.
Peter, this was the point that Miles Simmons and I made yesterday, because Miles made that same comment. You don't set on the foot on the field in year 4. Forget about year 5. You don't play in year 4 without your second contract. And that's exactly what Eric Burkhart said to reporters last year as an unnamed source. And the reports started to come out. That's what an agent does. The agent knows the reporters. Yeah. He was clearly the source when Pelissero reported that he's not setting foot on the field. It wasn't Kyler Murray. It was either Kyler Murray or Eric Burkhart. Of course it was Eric Burkhart. And then we get the single-space, 8-point font, Ted Kaczynski Unabomber manifesto that Burkhart put on Twitter, right? If you don't have an agent, that doesn't happen. That's part of what the agent does. And Peter, this is a combination. And we're getting closer to the point where the NFL Players Association is going to be in the crosshairs for the criticism here. Because between Richard Sherman, who was the typhoid Mary of this, hey, players can represent themselves and not get screwed. And he was dead wrong because he got screwed by the 49ers. And it's one thing for a guy to say, it's just my choice. Like Bobby Wagner, it's just my choice. And he did well for himself, frankly, negotiating his own deals with the Seahawks and then with the Rams. But when Sherman, because he's got an anti-agent bias, decides he's going to wave this flag for get rid of your agent, and guys listen to him, they're the ones who get screwed. And Lamar Jackson, I believe, has it in his head, I don't need to pay 3%. I don't need to pay 2%. I don't need to pay 1%. And the money doesn't come out of your game check. You got to write that check at the end of the year. So it feels like a bigger deal. It's like paying quarterly taxes. And guys don't want to do it. So penny wise and pound foolish is what that reality has been, especially for a guy like Lamar Jackson. And it's a damn shame for him, because you're right. Last week is the time to find out what's out there. And if there's nothing out there, Peter, if the Falcons, the Panthers, and the Dolphins truly aren't interested, a good agent finds a way to create interest out of nothing. Do me a favor here. And make an offer. Do me a favor here and bring him in for a visit. Do me a favor and sit down with him. Just let me have something I can use to try to get someone to come out of the weeds and pursue him. That's what a good agent does. When you have no agent, you have no one trying to create interest when otherwise, in Jackson's case, there is none.
Mike, one of the parts of the Lamar Jackson story that I smiled at because I talked to a lot of teams at the scouting combine. And I can just tell you that the list of teams that was given that has no interest in Lamar Jackson, I'm not saying it's Gorgonzola, but I'm saying that there was one or two teams on that list that have some interest in Lamar Jackson. I'm just telling you. When a beat writer might ask a general manager, do you have any interest in Lamar Jackson? Knowing that the general manager has a quarterback who's the very likely starting quarterback on his team, he's going to say, no, got no interest in Lamar Jackson. And I'm not saying that that team will end up having any interest in Lamar Jackson. But I know by my conversations last week in Indianapolis that all these teams that say they have no interest in Lamar Jackson, that is not necessarily the case. That's all I'm saying.
Right, but if you...
And
I hear you.
And I'm not saying that any of those teams will either bring him in or do anything like that. But you just made exactly the point that needs to be made. If Agent X could sit down with Scott Fitterer, the GM of the Carolina Panthers, for a drink, with Joe Douglas, general manager of the Jets, for a drink, for a coffee at the JW Marriott, whatever, sit down with any of those guys, then you will know exactly if the general manager trusts the agent to keep it absolutely, under the table until such point that there is a meeting, then that is what an agent does, and that is how an agent could have helped Lamar Jackson.
Look, it doesn't get any simpler than this. Last year, DeSean Watson, 20-plus civil lawsuits alleging sexual misconduct during massage therapy sessions pending against him. And yet still, David Mulugeta of Athletes First, number one, gets the Texans to be willing to trade him, which they were before all that stuff happened 2 years ago. As of March 17, that's the anniversary of the first lawsuit. That stuff was still boiling. He was able to get 4 teams to come to the table: the Saints, the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Browns. The Falcons had Matt Ryan. The Falcons alienated Matt Ryan. The Falcons had a restructured contract agreed to with Matt Ryan that would have kept him in Atlanta last year. And that blew up when they decided to go flirt with DeSean Watson. And the Browns had Baker Mayfield, and that blew up when they decided to go flirt with DeSean Watson. My point is, if you have an agent, the agent sets that up. The agent works those back channels. The agent gets everyone to the table, and it worked to perfection. And setting aside the whole non-exclusive franchise tag thing and the 2 first-round picks, maybe there's a trade to be made here. And I've been saying this for a long time as well, Peter. Because we don't know what Lamar Jackson really wants. Does he want to be with the Ravens or does he want to be with someone else? We just don't know. If he truly doesn't want to be with someone else, he needs to say so, and which he could do through his agent. And then the agent sets up a DeSean Watson-style competition for his services. And if that would ever happen, maybe he does end up with one team getting desperate and doing something that we would objectively say is dumb, like the Browns did. But for the Browns, it was the right move, the 5-year fully guaranteed DeSean Watson contract. And if nothing else, Peter, an agent can help Lamar Jackson understand how it was that Watson got it. It just didn't fall out of the sky. It took a lot of work. It probably took some luck. And it's the planets lining up just right. You got to have an agent help you align the planets. And that's what Lamar Jackson refuses to understand. And I said this yesterday. At a certain point, he's responsible for his own life and his own choices and his own failure to understand how an agent would help him. And I'm at the point where I've said all I can to try to help this guy. If he wants to have no long-term deal, no financial security, play year to year, or not play at all, because you know what, Peter, we may get to a point where he's got $32.4 million as his salary for 2023 because he hasn't signed a long-term contract, and he just says, I'm not playing for that. And he just doesn't play this year. If he wants to continue down this path, it's his business. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness includes within that implicitly the right to screw your life up if you want to. And if he wants to do it, more power to him. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.